Hello and welcome to another episode of Casual Learning. I'm your host, John Bannan. What's the deal with the divided page technique? The divided page technique is the best study method that I'm aware of. I learned it in 8th grade from my English teacher, and I used it ever since. It was what allowed me to get straight A's in high school and become the valedictorian. It's what I used to pass the bar exam to become an attorney. It's an extremely effective method of short-term memorization of information, which is exactly what you need in order to do very well on tests and examinations, especially in high school, college, and even graduate school or law school. So why is it called the divided page technique? Very simply, because it relies on dividing a piece of paper in half. It's a divided page, a divided piece of paper. So it's an easily accessible method to everybody, because everybody should be able to have access to or be able to afford paper. So what you do is you take a piece of paper like this, and you divide it in half lengthwise. Make sure the edges line up, and you have a nice crease in the middle, like that. Nice crease, sort of like making a paper airplane, but not quite. Nice crease in the middle. And then you fold it back on itself in the opposite direction along that same crease, like this. And you do that several times, back and forth. You continuously divide it along that crease, back and forth, until the crease becomes very malleable, and it's very easy to open it up regardless of what size you're working with. Okay. So now you have this piece of paper. It's divided in half. It opens sort of like a one-page book. You can fold it and look at the other side like that. All right. Now, I've always found that this is a blank piece of paper. I've always found that a piece of ruled paper works better because it gives you the lines that you can write on. So I would tend not to use blank paper like this. But if this is all you got, you can use this. You can use any paper, any sheet of 8.5 by 11 paper, or 8.5 by 14-inch paper, or legal size paper. So I prefer to use legal-sized paper when I do the divided page, and that's because it's longer. You can put more information on it, and it's also ruled. So there's lines that can guide you when you write on it, so that it's not sloppy looking, and so everything lines up properly. So a pad of legal paper is very cheap. So if you're going to do this, I would suggest getting legal paper, a pad of legal paper, which you can pick up at any paper supply store, or even big box stores like Walmart probably has it. And it's not that expensive. So again, the same process. I'm bending it back and forth along that same crease, making sure the crease is nice and flexible. Okay, so I have my piece of paper. Now I'm ready to go in studying. So what do? All right, well, I take the piece of paper, and the front part of it is going to be where you have your left-hand margin here. You fold this part behind. Okay, so this is going to be the front of my divided page. So what do? The first thing I do is I keep track of what sheet this is. So, for instance, this is my first sheet that I'm going to use. So what I'll do is I'll put a number. I'll number the sheets so that I remember the order of them. So I'll put maybe a 1 up here in a circle. Okay, you see that? So I know this is the first sheet I'm working with. So what do? Well, you take your notes from your class or the information that you need to know for this exam, and hopefully you know what that is. I can't help you in studying for a test or an exam if you don't know what's going to be on it. So hopefully you know what's going to be on this test, or have an idea. You may have a lot of information that you're supposed to know for the test, and not all that information is going to appear on the test, but you don't know what's going to be on it and what isn't going to be on it. So what you got to do is you have to study everything and memorize everything, all the knowledge, all the notes, so that you know whatever answer it is for whatever question they throw at you. So you got to memorize everything. So you take out your notes or the information you need to learn, and just like the game show Jeopardy, everything can be turned into a question, and that's the secret to divided page technique. You put everything in question answer format. So now let's say this is your divided page. So you take out your notes and you're like, okay, who was the first president of the United States? Oh, it was George Washington. I need to know that for my history exam. So you start off on the first ruled line of your piece of paper. Okay, first ruled line, and you write in the question. Who was the first president of the United States of America? And on the opposite side, you put the answer. George Washington. All right. So on this first line, you would write, who is the President of the United States? If the question takes more than one line, you could use multiple lines, as many lines as you need to write the question. And on the opposite side, you write the answer. George Washington. So then you go to the next piece of information that you need to know. All right. The Declaration of Independence was signed in 1776. Okay, so you turn to the question. What year was the Declaration of Independence signed? Okay, that might take up 2 lines, the next 2 lines. And then over here on the first line, you write the answer. Now, the answer takes more than 1 line. You just continue to as many lines as you need to put down the answer. So this is 1776. And you continue this pattern of question and answer. Take whatever information you need to know for the test, turn it into the form of a question, write that question down, and then on the opposite side of the paper, write the answer. You can turn any piece of information into a question. They do this on Jeopardy all the time. So even math can be put in the form of a question. You know, You could say, what is x minus 7 equals, 7. You could put an equation on there. And then, maybe you have to solve this on a separate piece of paper. Maybe you can do it in your head. But, the answer is going to be x equals 14. You put that on that side. So you can do this for any, divided page for any subject. And you should. So, once you've filled out the first side with questions and put in their answers, and you need more space, well, what you do is you divide the page like this, and you start on the back. Really simple. So you do the same thing, but on the back. So you put your next question up on the first line, and then you put the answer over here. And you just do it on the back of the piece of paper until the whole back of the piece of paper is filled in with questions. If you still have enough, if there's still more information that you need to learn. Once you get the information you need on both sides of the piece of paper, and there's more information that you need to study for the test, all you do is you take out another piece of paper. Okay. And you just do the same thing. Divide that in half. You gotta make sure when you divide it, it's even. You don't want it to be sloppy. You literally can turn any piece of information into a question. There's some areas where it may be a little tricky to do that, but if you're creative, you can figure out a way to do it. Like for instance, let's say it's a spelling test, right? You can't say, how do you spell cow? Because the question itself will tell you how to spell cow. So you can't say it that way. You have to do it a little bit different. Like your question might be, what is a large animal that gives milk? You know the answer is cow. So then you say cow, and it's spelled C-O-W. And you'll have cow written over here. That way, you don't give away the answer, but you still know what it is you're testing. So you can put the definition of the word on this side, so you can test the spelling of the word. And if your test is about the definition of the word, well, you just put the word here and the definition over there. So you see the word, and then you say, oh, that means blah, 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 and that's what your answer is over there. So you got to be a little bit creative sometimes to be able to put everything in a question answer format. But you can do it. It can be done. So you get the second piece of paper, and you label it 2. Okay, so this is number 2. And it's important to label these pieces of paper because sometimes information is in a certain order, and you want to kind of keep that order. Or you want to make sure that you've studied every page that you're supposed to study. And if you don't keep the pages in order, you may forget whether you finished them all or not. So you do the same thing, number 2. All right, so you put your question up here and then your answer. And then you fill this completely out with all the information you need. And if you need more information, you fold that in half. And you do it again, but on the back. Put your question up here, and then your answer over there. Now, you can use this technique to study for anything. Anything where you have to memorize information. And, you simply keep adding additional pages until you've gotten all the information down on your divided pages that you need to study for. So, however many pages it takes. When I studied for the bar exam to become an attorney, I had 33 of these. 33 of these pages. That's all the information I had to know. But chances are your school tests, high school tests, whatever, they're not going to be any more than 10 pages probably. They may even be only a handful of pages. You can fit a lot of information on the front and back, especially a piece of legal paper, because it's longer, it contains more information. So then what do? All right, so the first thing you do is you create your divided pages, however many it takes. And the very process of writing down a question and putting in the answer, that process of writing, is an extremely effective method of studying. So just writing these things up, yes, it takes time and effort to do this. There's no doubt about it. And that's the one drawback to the divided page technique, is there's a lot of time invested in putting this together before you study. But you get that time back because once you get these things prepared, it's really easy to study after that fact. So the divided page technique is well worth the effort it takes to make these things. And the bonus is, while you're preparing them, you're also studying. And the form of studying where you write something down is more effective than just simply saying it out loud or to yourself. It's a more effective way of studying. So your first attempt at studying by creating these pages is really an excellent form of studying. So you do that, you create these pages. You already know some of the information because you created these pages in order to do that. You went through your materials once, so you're already studied to some extent. Okay, so what do you do next? Well, you study. Once you have your divided pages together, you take them and you start with page 1. Put the other pages aside for a moment. Page 1, and you start at the top of page 1. And you fold them in half, and you don't look at the answer, you just look at the question. And you just go through the questions one by one by one by one. And the first question you look at is like, who's the first president of the United States? And you stand there, or you say to yourself, either out loud or to yourself, you're like, well, that's George Washington. And then you take the page and you turn it just like that. You look at the first answer and you see whether you're right or not. And then you turn it back. It's sort of like a flashcard, except you're not bothered with all those index cards. I mean, who's going to be bothered making up 100 index cards for one test? And then how many packs and packs of index cards do you have to buy? Nobody's going to do that. So but this is a very cheap and easy way, and it's as effective and frankly more effective than index cards. And it's also very convenient. You can take this whole packet and you can simply fold it up and stick it in your pocket and take it with you. You can study on the road. You can study on the bus. You can study right before class, right before the test. Right before the test, you can take this out of your pocket or your purse or wherever you put it, and you can sit there and you can study till the second before she she or he, whoever the teacher is, tells you to put your stuff away, then you're like, oh, okay. All right, I'll stick this back in my pocket. I'm ready. Very convenient method of study. You can take it with you anywhere. So what do you do? So you go through the first question. Oh, it's George Washington. Turn back to the questions. Then you go to question number 2. What year was the Declaration of Independence signed? 1775. And you look at the answer and like, it was 1776. Okay. You turn back. You go to the third question. Third question. What is x minus 7 equals 7? That's 13. Look at the answer. Oh, no, it was 14. All right. So the idea is you take the first page and you go through all the questions and you ask them to yourself and you guess, you say to yourself what the answer is out loud or to yourself. And then you check to see if your answer is right. And then you go through every question on this side and you keep note of the fact of, did you get any of the questions wrong? Maybe you got them all right. And then you go to the back page. And then you do the same thing on the back page. Go through the questions one by one, telling yourself what the answer is, flipping to see whether you got the answer right, and then flipping back. Don't worry, when you flip over to see the answer, you're really not going to look at the answers for the other questions. You do this so quickly and you're focused on just that one question. That really doesn't happen. It's not a big problem. So then you go on the back of the page, you go through all the questions and give your answers to yourself, check to see whether they're correct, and then make note of whether you got any wrong. You don't have to remember which ones you got wrong and which ones you didn't get wrong, but just make note of whether you got, to yourself, whether you got them all right or not. So then you go, after you do that, you go to page 2, and you do the same thing, back and forth. You go through all the questions on the front of page 2, and then you fold it over. And then you go through all the questions on the back of page 2. And then let's just say you only need 2 pages worth of information back and forth. Front and back for this particular test. Okay, so you get to the end of page 2 and you're done. You studied once. And you say to yourself, well, did I get all those questions right? Did I get any wrong? Well, if the answer is you didn't get any wrong, you got them all correct, well, you can stop for now. But if you got any of those questions wrong, well, start it all over again. Once you're done with your packet, you got any of those questions wrong? Do it again. Write that in there. Say, okay, I'm going to do this again. And you repeat the process for however many times it takes for you to get the answers to every question correct. So if you got to go through this whole packet twice to do that, do it. You got to go through it 5 times, the whole packet, 5 times before you get everything correct. Do that. Because at the point at which you go through the entire packet and you get every question correct, that is at the point where you have memorized 100% of the information correctly. And that's the best way to get the best grade you can on a test. So you study till you get to the point where you got everything right. Then you can put the packet down, or you can put the packet, in your back pocket or in your purse or wherever. And then, you take some time. It depends on when you start studying for the test. If it's a really, really long test, you may want to start, days or even a week or so in advance, like if it was a bar exam. But generally speaking, you might only study a day before, or maybe even 2 days before you're starting with this packet. So you put the paper down, go away, do something else. Maybe a few hours later, you come back to it, take it out again, study it again. Do the same process. Start at page number 1, go through the questions on the front and the back for however many pages you have. Did you get them all correct when you went through? If you didn't, do it again. Go through the whole packet again and all the questions again until you get all the questions correct. And then you've cemented what you previously studied into your memory. What you're doing is you're cementing this information into your short-term memory. This is not really a technique for long-term learning or long-term memory. This is really just for short-term memory, for doing well on tests. Because that's what tests, tests don't measure your long-term memory, they measure your short-term memory. It's the only question the test wants to know is, do you know this information right now? That's it, short-term. Do you know it right now? And that's what this is great at, allowing you to learn information in your short-term memory. So did you go through it again? Did you get them all right? You got them all right now? Okay, great. Hopefully you did. Put it in your back pocket. Maybe come back a few hours later, maybe before you go to sleep, pull it out again. Do the same thing over again. Did you get all the questions correct? If you didn't, go through it again until you got them all correct. Put it away. Go to bed. Go to sleep. Get up the next morning at some point. Go through it again. Do the same thing again. Hopefully by this time you've studied so much, you're going to get all the questions correct. But you may not. And if you don't, go through it again until you get them all correct. That way you know you memorize 100% of the information. Then you're going to school, maybe you take it out, study on the bus. Do it again while you're on the bus. Or maybe you're in your classroom. I don't know, you have some free time. Go through it again. It's a very convenient way to study because everything you need to know is in this little packet right here. You don't have to pull out books or anything. It's right here. Very simple thing to do. Simple, convenient. Pull it out of your back pocket. You got it. And do it again. Did you get every question correct? If you didn't, go through the packet again until you got them all correct. You can take this. You can study right before your test, which is actually a smart thing to do. Hopefully you studied this the day before or 2 days before and you studied it that morning. But, studying right before the test is a really good idea because you're trying to get this in your short-term memory. And what better way to get it into your short-term memory than to study right before you take the test to refresh your recollection of what you had been studying the last night or the day before or whatever, or on the bus. So take it out right before the test and, go through it again and study it for, as long as they'll let you before they tell you to put your stuff away because you have to take the test. Okay. And then you get the stuff in your short-term memory and you're going to do great on that test, provided you studied the right information, provided you knew the information that you needed to know for the test. You're going to do great because you've guaranteed that you've memorized everything you need to know for that test. So how could you not do good? You're going to do great. Another thing this allows you to do is it really gives you confidence going into a test. When you have this packet of paper, you know that if you know the information on these pieces of paper, you're going to do well on that test. You can't help but do well. So you know what you need to learn. By testing yourself, how much of it you actually know. And you should be doing this enough so that you know 100% of it. You know the answer to every question. And when you know that you have the answer to 100% of the questions on this packet of paper, you know you're going to do well on that test, period. So it really boosts your confidence in terms of taking exams or tests. You know you'll do well. You do this. You do the divided page technique, and you will do well, guaranteed. Big confidence boost right there. Once you've done your test and you got 100 because you studied everything and you knew the answer to everything could possibly be on the test, take the divided pages and store them. Put them somewhere. Don't just throw them out. put them in your folder or put them somewhere safe, because you may need to study this information again, maybe for a midterm, or maybe for a final examination. Or maybe, you can give this to somebody else, a friend or a sibling who may take the same test at some point, and then now they have the information. But hold on to it, unless you absolutely know you're never going to use this again. But hold on to it, because that midterm comes up, and or that final comes up, and you got a bookload of things to know. But you can pull out your divided pages that you've done throughout the course of the semester or the year, and you've already got all the information you need to know for the final in these divided pages that you had already created. And therefore, you just put them all together and you study them all as a group. And that's how you study for your midterm or your final examination. You already have all the information. You don't have to recreate the divided page again with the same information. Just hold on to it. It's a great thing to use later for final examinations. It's great. So I hope you use the divided page to study. It's really almost a guaranteed method of obtaining, an A or 100% on one of your tests. Now, granted, there are some tests that you may not be able to use this with, if it's a writing test and you have to write an essay about something. This may not be useful in that. It might be or might not be, depending, because if the essay has to hit upon certain information, you could memorize that information it has to hit upon. But I know the divided page technique doesn't work for every type of examination, but it's going to work for 95% of the tests that you have to take. And this one little technique can turn you into an A or even an A+ student. Whereas before that, maybe you were a B student. Or if you're a C student, this could turn you into an A student. I mean, it's that powerful a technique. Yes, it requires an investment of time to create this, but you're not losing anything because you're studying while you're creating this, and then it's a lot easier to study after you've created this. And then you can hold on to this for midterms or finals. So you don't have to put all that effort in finals or midterms trying to restudy the stuff you learned earlier in the year that you forgot. So it has an upfront investment of time and effort, but it's well worth it. And it really is the secret to getting good grades. All right. That's all I have about the divided page technique. I hope you use it, and I hope you turn into a A+ student because of it. All right. Take care, guys.